What up, book lovers? It is G-Swizz here, and I am here today to talk about all the series, all of them, that I read in 2021. Emphasis on the all, because I finished 35 series. And you might be wondering, G-Swizz, how'd you do it without driving yourself to insanity? There was a thing called lockdown, like a 4-month thing. And also, I mean, I was going through a pretty tough time last year. Your girl needed to escape. So, your girl did that. I decided I needed to read series back to back to back to back because I just could not get enough. I just kept myself from being bored. I had the best reading year of my entire life. In 2021, it makes me feel like I never had anhedonia in the first place. That is a big thing to say, but it's amazing. I'd kind of be happy even if I never read 35 series in a year. I don't have to beat that record in 2022. I'm just satisfied with the fact that I read 35 book series in 1 year. I demolished a bunch of my TBR. Like, it just feels really good to actually have a bunch of books on my shelf that I've read. I'm gonna go through every single one of the book series that I've read, and I'm gonna give you my rating and just my little 2 cents on what I thought about the series. And I guess this will kind of help those people who just want a little snippet as to should they read it, should they not read it, based on my rating, because some people trust me. I don't know why you trust me. Am I that trustworthy? I don't know. You know, some of you guys do like my series videos, and I like delivering them. So I guess without further ado, let's get into delivering this one. So the first series I ended up completing. I classify this as 2 series because anybody in the fandom probably would, considering that they come in parts. The first 2 series I completed this year were Jojo's Bizarre Adventure Part 2 and Jojo's Bizarre Adventure Part 3. I ended up completing Part 2 first. I remember probably completing it in my first or second week of this year. And I love Part 2 because I love following young Joseph. There's some really funny references in Part 2. I feel like Part 2 is a bit underrated. And then there's Part 3, which is the part that pretty much put Jojo's Bizarre Adventure on the map for a lot of people because it's the first part that has stands in it. It's the part following Jotaro and old Joseph, who's in Part 2 as the main Jojo, but now he's become a side character in Part 3 and he's Jotaro Kujo's grandfather. It's pretty fascinating to get to follow all of them. I gave both these series 4 out of 5 stars. In terms of this series, I think the reason why I would duck a star is because as much as I do find it entertaining, I'm just gonna put some trigger warnings on the screen. Like, this is not for the faint of heart. This is not for anybody who gets squeamish. So if you do get squeamish, if you do struggle with that kind of stuff, I would highly recommend you stay away from this series. However, if you like a good entertaining plot, Jojo's Bizarre Adventure is bizarre but in the best ways possible. The next series I completed, it ended up being my favorite new series. And I say that because if you've watched my favorites video of 2021, it's in the top 3, but you see that it's tied with something that I reread. That is the Malediction Trilogy by Danielle L. Jensen. I did not think that I would love this series as much as I did, but I did. Danielle L. Jensen has a way with words and also a way into working into your heart and pulling out your heartstrings, essentially. I was heartbroken. I was shook majority of the time. It just felt weird to be so attached to some characters like that, and I'm really happy that this was the first full series beside manga that I read last year because it really just reminded me how much I loved to read and fall in love with characters. So this one I gave a 5 out of 5 stars without a doubt. It is definitely my favorite book series by Danielle L. Jensen and one of my favorite trilogies of all time. And then we move on to All the Stars and Teeth by Adeline Grace. I did like this duology. I do wish that it was longer, but I do still feel like I got attached enough to these characters in this duology. I do like me a good sea fantasy if done well, and I believe that All the Stars and Teeth was. People are still talking about it. I feel like sometimes it's hard for duologies to stay relevant, and I feel like All the Stars and Teeth has done everything it possibly can to be relevant to the point that everybody is really anticipating Belladonna, which is the next book by Adeline Grace. This duology gets a 4 out of 5 stars for me. And then we come to the King of Scars duology by Leigh Bardugo. This is the irony of the fandom. Some people will absolutely love the first book of the series and then just think that the second book is okay. And then some people will not like the first book, but then love the second book. I am in the boat where I loved the first book more than I loved the second. The duology would have been like a 5 out of 5 stars for me if some decisions weren't made in the second book. I still enjoyed it. And then we come to the BoneCrys series. This series started off really strong. BoneCrys Moon was one of my favorite books of last year. BoneCrys Dawn, however, could have lasted longer. I feel like the series was built to be a trilogy and it was just rushed. Actually makes me sad, but at the very same time, I still enjoyed my time reading it. I still loved these characters, and I kind of really wish that I will get a spin-off with Sabine and her love story. I just want more of them, but then at the very same time, we didn't even originally get much with the original love story to begin with. I do like the fact that it mostly followed these two sisters and their journey. I think that that was really important, but I'm a tiny bit sad, let's just say that. So I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It would have been a 5 out of 5 stars if the series was extended somehow. The next series I completed last year was the Cursebreakers Trilogy by Bridget Kemmerer. This one's a 3 out of 5 stars. First book, amazing, and I think that that is the popular opinion. I feel like a lot of people are debating that the second book's good. We're just too hard on Grey. Don't get me wrong, I would love a POV book with Grey. It's just, I felt like his romance with the girl in this book was just a bit too rushed, considering how long he's gone without romance. And then you've also got the vengeful family of this girl. The vengeful family is never really fully dealt with in this series. I feel like that is just too open-ended, and I mean, if it is addressed in this spin-off, then yes, I would totally understand what kind of threat is looming and why that is important. But I mean, I was just really angry because things weren't resolved there. And then you've got the third book where the Beast character is a total jerk. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, right? You want to see this character's development. You don't really get to see this character's development. All you really get is one resolution scene between one character and another, and he trusts that this person will do better, but you never get to see better from the Beast character. You never get to see better. You never get to see him do better. I really feel like Harper, out of all people, really deserved better in the series. And then we come to the Dark Element series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is a solid 2.5 stars for me. This is an unpopular opinion because everybody likes Roth better, but like not at the expense of a plot. That sounded so cruel to say. Not at the expense of a plot, not at the expense of Zane, not at the expense for anybody's health, for that matter. I actually read a Goodreads review that Jennifer L. Armentrout didn't actually know who Layla was gonna end up with. Jennifer, I do like your other books, but why didn't you think about this? Like, that is how you trap yourself into a hole. You think that you're probably writing a better love triangle, but no, you're not, because you haven't actually thought it through. This is the one instance I am super mad at Jennifer. 2.5 out of 5 stars. And then we go on to this spin-off series, the Harbinger Trilogy, where Jennifer actually probably learned her lesson. 4.5 out of 5 stars for this one. I loved the Harbinger Trilogy, and I think that it improved the series, it improved the world so much. There was so much more added to the world. There was so much more plot in the story. It was actually just perfect. I couldn't have asked for a better trilogy, but hey, I would like another spin-off eventually. And if we don't get another spin-off, cool. But regardless, I'm just excited that Jennifer revisited this world and vindicated Zane. Then we go to Fable, which is a solid 3 stars. I didn't really care for this series, to be honest. Fable wasn't really great. I don't actually remember much about it. I can't really give too much of my opinion, unfortunately. But what I do remember is that I wasn't really that entertained. Theyre Dark Valkyrie by Eva Chase. If you guys have never heard about this one is an independently published fantasy series that kind of involves Norse gods, but it's a reverse harem, which I did not know going into it. Multiple love interests. There are 4 love interests, and it does get steamy. The problem is with this series, and I feel like it fell flat when it had really promising potential in the story, the whole scope that it was given, being about Norse mythology and everything. I feel like there wasn't really a focus on the plot as much, and I feel like the story was trying to decide to be one thing and then switch back to being another thing. You'd have like the steamy romance, but then all of a sudden you're taken out of it because there's a plot, and I feel like it just wasn't really well-rounded. It was a 4-book series, but all of them were really quick and they just felt very rushed. It was a 3.5 out of 5 stars for me. I'm not gonna lie, I did enjoy the steam, and you know, it was my first reverse harem, so yeah, it was just a really fun time for me, let's just say that. But it's not necessarily the book series that I would recommend if you would want a really good, well fleshed out plot, or maybe even a very good, well fleshed out romance, because I feel like not everybody was satisfied in the end. And then Into the Crooked Place by Alexandra Christo. This one gets a 3 out of 5 stars. This one I have mentioned in my most disappointing reads of 2021. It's pretty much trying to be Six of Crows, but it can't compare. It's just the way that it's written, in a sense that it's meant to make you feel adrenaline, but then you're pretty much told things. You're not really shown things. You're not really compelled in like certain action sequences sequences. Characters get from A to B very quickly, and things get good because I read the original Iron Fey series by Julie Kagawa. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars because that, I'd say, is the average rating that I would give each book. They weren't necessarily 5 out of 5 star material for me. I feel like they could have gone beyond in certain aspects to be 5 out of 5 stars, but regardless, it was a very satisfying quartet. And then we move on to Shadowfall by Audrey Gray. This is Audrey Gray's dystopian series. I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars, not necessarily because it wasn't great, it's just I feel like it could have been expanded upon more, similar to a few other series that I've mentioned. I just felt like it was a little bit rushed, but the concept was really cool. It's just I know that we're never really going to revisit the world. I just kind of wanted more before we say goodbye to it. The Red Winter Trilogy, you guys already know, 5 out of 5 stars. I read this entire trilogy within 24 hours and I have no regrets. It was so good. All of them are 5 out of 5 star reads. All of those books are so good and you guys are sleeping on them. Don't just stop sleeping on them. Like, obviously finish my video right now, but pick up the book after you finish my video, please. Amazing illustrations. If you listen to the audiobook, captivating audiobook. I just feel like rereading this trilogy already. The Air Awakens series, 5 out of 5 stars. This was a reread, except this was a reread where I was actually paying more attention to it. I really love these characters. You know, I did fluctuate with my ratings throughout the series. Not all of the books were 5 out of 5 stars, but when I think about this series, it's a 5 out of 5 star series for me. And if I actually went back and reread the series, I'm pretty sure I would give all these books a 5 out of 5 stars, knowing the rest of Elise Kobo books that I've read. I mean, I do like some of Elise Kobo's books, but the Air Awakens series, the original series, is a masterpiece. But I can't say the same for the Vortex Chronicles, the Air Awakens Vortex Chronicles. This series gets a 3 out of 5 stars for me. The second half of the trilogy, the series takes a turn, like a very different turn that I'm not liking. I thought that the series was foreshadowing something that I wanted, but no. It ended up using its time for something else. So that's why I give this series a 3 out of 5 stars. Probably appreciate it more when I read it in the future. I know that Elise Kova is now writing a spin-off to the series. I didn't know that A Trial of Sorcerers was a spin-off for Air Awakens and kind of feels like the same vibes. So I'm hoping that that impresses me more. I might appreciate the Vortex Chronicles more if I read that series and get through that eventually. The Girl at Midnight series. This would have been a 5 out of 5 stars, but I give it a 4 out of 5 stars. I loved the first 2 books. I was enjoying the 3rd book until the big thing happens at the end. The ending literally took a star away from this book. I love the series, but I don't like the message that the final book sends out. I think the ending of the series kind of encourages and enables an abusive character. The fact that there was no growth in that character that I'm referring to just made the big event really give me a bitter taste in my mouth, because I don't care if that person's like a family member, I would not enable their behavior like that. I would recommend it if you're okay with terrible endings. The Talon Saga by Julie Kagawa. This series I gave a 4 out of 5 stars because that was kind of my general rating throughout the series. It's rare that you get long book series like that, you know, so I just really enjoyed my reading experience of it. I love Julie Kagawa's writing. I love her series. She just does a really good job with urban fantasy. The Conspiracy of Us trilogy. I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I did not expect this to be one of my favorite series of all time, but I mean, my favorites video of 2021 explains why it is. It's really good. I loved the hate to love romantic dynamic. I love the slow burn dynamic. I love the concept of the series, and it's not usually the kind of series that I would regularly read. The Serpent and Dove trilogy. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars rounded up. I loved the first book. The second book, I do have to admit, was kind of a bridge book, but I still enjoyed the plot. I was heartbroken toward the end. And then Gods and Monsters, as much as it left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, I loved the idea of Gods and Monsters because I've talked about this in my favorites video. Just the concept of unconditional love. Shelby Mahurin absolutely nailed. I think she proved a point. The next series I completed was Alchemist of Loom by Elise Kova. I did not like this one as much as the Air Awakens saga, but I did prefer it over the Vortex Chronicles. So I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I think that this series was really good. I kind of want to reread it in the future. I kind of was wishing that it was going to be more like Air Awakens, but I feel like that clouded my judgment a little bit. Maybe it clouded my judgment just like my reading slump last year affected my judgment for the Air Awakens saga. So I will be rereading The Alchemist of Loom in the future. Supernatural Academy. I don't know whether to give this a 3.5 stars or a 2.5 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed the first book so much, and I enjoyed the beginning of the second book, but then the second book takes a nasty turn with the love interest. Crown of Feathers by Nikki Palcretto. This one I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. I'm not gonna lie, I did expect more from this series. I feel like the people who love the series really love it, and some people give up on the series. I just found it to be okay. I felt like it was a little too long. I didn't like all the perspectives. I did enjoy the main two sister characters' POVs, even though I didn't like both sisters. Let's just say that it was a ride. The Folk of the Air series. I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I love The Cruel Prince. I love Jude. I love Cardan. And you know, yeah, it doesn't really have too much plot. That's why I didn't give it a full 5 out of 5 stars. However, it's so iconic. Of course, it's one of my favorites. Speaking of favorite series, Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. This one's a 5 out of 5 star series for me. This was actually a reread. I reread it for the first time in like 5 years and I fell in love. First time I read it, I felt like I wasn't even paying attention, and now look where we are. I'm really happy that I finally gave this book series the attention that it deserved, and now I want to reread it for years to come. The next series I read was the Sky Hunter duology by Marie Lu. This duology was absolutely magnificent. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This duology was completed so well. Yeah, I could not thank Marie Lu enough for that. And we're gonna go on to a trilogy that I kind of feel like a little bit salty about. Yeah, The Gilded Wolves by Rishoni Chokshi. 3.5 out of 5 stars. This series started off strong. The first book, without a doubt, was 5 out of 5 stars. The second book, 3-ish stars. I don't know. Third book, 3 stars. I feel betrayed. I'm not gonna go too far into it, but I mean, if you finish the book series, I think some of you guys feel the way I feel. Enter this in my most disappointing reads of 2021. Danielle L. Jensen did a very similar ending, but she did it better. She did it in a better context. The Bronze Beast did not do it in the right context. We were yearning the entire series, only to get nothing. The All Souls Trilogy by Deborah Harkness. This one's a 4 out of 5 stars for me. I really love the All Souls series so much. It's such a slow burn. Like, even when you're watching the TV series, you realize how much of a slow burn the series actually is, but you're kind of living for it. I did enjoy it. Where Dreams Descend by Janella Angelis. So this one's a 4 out of 5 stars. I would have rated this higher if second book wasn't as rushed. Yeah, I've said this about a few duologies. I just wish that duologies kind of like were well paced, were well timed. It could have been a trilogy. I took what I could get. I think that Janella Angelis is a good author, and I think that she did a great job regardless, and I will be reading more books from her in the future. The Life After series by Julie Hull. I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I loved the ending of the series. I think that the ending worked very well. I also liked the Logan novella. I just feel like the first 2 books weren't that great, especially in terms of the romance. Like, I wasn't really buying the romance that much. I do kind of like its take on Christian faith and Christianity. It's very interesting. I never actually usually see Demon Hunter series that are kind of pro-Christianity. Some of them have characters who don't necessarily believe in God and don't really do it for God. They just do it because they're wanting to defeat the bad guys. But this one had a very interesting perspective because this series talked about God a lot, but not doing it in a very preachy way. I've never seen a book series do it in that way. So I found that very fascinating about the series. But if I'm talking about the quality of the first 2 books, maybe I'll reread it in the future and we'll see. Yes, at the moment it's a 3.5 out of 5 stars overall for the series. The Promised Neverland. I gave this series a 4 out of 5 stars. So altogether, I think that the series was good. I know that there are some unpopular opinions that say that the series didn't end well or like went on for too long. I do have to say, when it comes to The Promised Neverland, I think the author made a few decisions a little bit too convenient toward the very end. I can understand why it's not a popular opinion to say that this series is spectacular, because it's not without flaw. However, I did enjoy my reading experience of it, and I'm pretty sure everybody does enjoy the plot anyway. And then I read Demon Slayer. I give Demon Slayer altogether around a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's really difficult by the end because, you know, like, you have to say goodbye to kind of most of them. You have to say goodbye to all of them by the end. Like, let's be real. I'm not saying that they all die. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. If you guys are thinking that I'm spoiling it. No, it's just like, you're obviously gonna have to finish the series anyway. It was very good for the most part. It's a very good story, very heartfelt, and it teaches you so much. And that's what I appreciate about Demon Slayer, and I'm so sad that I have to say goodbye to it now. Second last series I completed this year was Death Note. This one is a 4 out of 5 stars. I didn't think that I would actually prefer some aspects of the manga over the anime. I love the Death Note anime. Then the ending kind of changed everything for me. Like, even though the ending isn't even that spectacular, I prefer the way that it ended, because like when you're watching the anime, you're like, what? That's it? But like, there's like a really cool final moment in the ending. I love it. Kind of feels a bit more sinister in the manga. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to watch the anime and feel the same way that I did originally. It really left that kind of mark on me. And then we come to my final series that I completed in 2021, and it's also one of my most disappointing series of the year. A Song of Wraiths and Ruin. Altogether, the duology gets a 3 out of 5 stars. The last book gets a 2 out of 5 stars. The first book was like a 4. This duology does not feel complete. I don't care what you guys say about like, oh, the author wanted to end it in an open-ended way. I don't care. fair if you want to say that. Like, it feels so cheap. I can't believe that she did that to us. I mean, unless there's a spin-off or unless there's a third book, I can't say that the series is complete. Like, I'm actually just disappointed. Also, like, the series has a really large scope, and I really enjoyed the scope in the first book, but I feel like the second book, we just didn't really get as much as I felt like we were promised. This is my opinion. Someone else might have a different opinion, and I would respect your opinion. You don't have to agree, but that's what I have to say. Hopefully, based on this year, I've given you some good recommendations, and I'm not discouraging you from checking out the series that I didn't like, but those are my opinions. Do with that what you will, I guess. If you happen to enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already. Join the amazing community of book lovers, and also I have social medias. I'm at gswizzlebooks on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also Goodreads. That's www.goodreads.com/gswizzle, and finally, I'm at TikTok. I'm at gswizzle on TikTok if you want to follow me there for some bookish content. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later. Peace.
Started out with half and I flipped it in a double. Started out with half and I flipped it in a double.